You're listening to the Mission Makers Show, a podcast that inspires humans to get into the mindset of success. My name's Farah Nanji, and I'm the founder of a business in the motorsports industry that explores leadership lessons from things like Formula One. I'm also a DJ and music producer in the underground electronic scene, and a public speaker on key topics like resilience, building high-performance teams, overcoming learning difficulties, and stimulating creativity. And to tie it all together, I love writing thought-provoking content as a journalist for these industries which are so unique in themselves. On this show, I'm sitting down with some of the most inspiring and driven people I've met around the world to talk about their processes, their failures, the lessons they've learned, and how they are truly making an impact for this world. I'm delighted to say that my guest today is none other than the man behind TEDx in Luxembourg City, Dirk Daenen. Dirk's had a really impressive career not only as the curator behind TEDx, but he's also a communications expert for several Fortune 500 companies. He's the Dean of the British Chamber Academy and is a guest lecturer at several universities around the world on public speaking and negotiation, something I pick his brains on a lot in this episode. And unsurprisingly, he's also trained over 100 TEDx speakers, including myself, so we talk about what he looks for in a TED speaker and what it's been like for the organisation during the pandemic. And I have to say, and I'm not just saying this, but his coaching skills are absolutely phenomenal, and you'll see why in this episode. He transformed my TED Talk in just under an hour the night before the talk, and we've since gone on to become good friends and colleagues as I invited him to become one of the co-founders of a company that I'm currently building called the Formula Mind, which explores how Formula One teams approach things like managing risk, sustainability, communication, leadership, and so much more, and we bring those insights to senior management teams to unlock more of their human performance. Hey Dirk, how are you?
Hi, Farah. Really well, thanks.
So yeah, thanks for agreeing to be a guest on today's show. It's going to be a deep dive into the man behind TEDx Luxembourg, and yeah, we're putting you on the spot today rather than the other way around. um,
You did enjoy it though, right? As a speaker for TEDx Luxembourg City, it was an experience, wasn't it?
yeah, absolutely. No, it was an amazing experience. Amazing experience. No doubt, no doubt. And I'm so glad that we've managed to stay in touch and it wasn't just that one day in Luxembourg. So let's start from the beginning. Before I ask you how you actually discovered what you're passionate about in life, let's start with what your name means. Would you like to share that with us?
My name, as in Dirk.
As in Dirk.
Okay, so Dirk is it was chosen because my parents are originally from Belgium, and it was chosen because of Saint Diederik, which is a saint that my father particularly liked. So I come from quite a religious background. But I understand that the word Dirk is also, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's a small Scottish dagger. So I'm pretty certain that that wasn't something my father was thinking about, or at least I hope it wasn't when he chose my name. So yeah, I like to hope that I've lived up to the expectations of my father, but I'm certainly not saintly.
That's funny. And how was your childhood growing up?
Yeah, it was amazing. So it wasn't typical. I'll give you that. I'm technically Belgian. I have a Belgian passport because both my parents are Belgian. But in fact, I was born in Germany. I was there for 2 years, then moved to France for 3 years, then moved to the UK, then moved to the States. Each time, sort of a few years at a time. Moved back to the UK, then to Brazil, back to the UK, back to Brazil. So yeah, I was a little bit all over the place, but really fascinating. It was really, I've got to say that I'm married now, and my wife, she was born and bred in Devonshire in the UK. And so we have really contrasting backgrounds in the sense that she was sort of this farm girl and grew up and has her friends there. Whereas my friends are just, thanks to Facebook anyway, I'm in contact with them and they're just all over the world. It's really quite bizarre. But no, I absolutely loved my childhood growing up.
So when did you and how did you first discover your passions in life? Because they are quite unique. So how did that all sort of start for you?
So my passions are, of course, there's the obvious passion for cars and anything automotive, but it kind of my passion kind of veered a little bit skew, and it really just went into education. I started off as an IT consultant because I did an IT degree and then a computer science, and then I went to do a management science degree, which is sort of a mathematics based management degree. So, which is, completely different from what I do now, which is I'm a professor in communication studies. So, you couldn't go more of a hard science as anything arithmetic, and then suddenly going into this soft skill, these communication skills. But what I discovered as an IT consultant, I had the opportunity to do a sponsored MBA. So my company sponsored my MBA, and while I was doing that, I had a teacher for intercultural communication who was fascinating. Like, just, I was riveted to what he said, and I'd use every opportunity to go and talk to the chap afterwards, and read all the books that he suggested. And so I went back to my company after I'd finished my MBA, but that spark of intercultural communication and how that worked and how people perceived things, that just really sort of, that stuck in my mind. So I went back to work at the company, and I had to do another 2 years, otherwise I would have had to pay the money back, that sponsorship back. But I just felt like, I was buying my time just to leave and go and do what I wanted to do. So I ended up finding a job at the University of Antwerp, doing research in communication studies, and so I taught there as well. And it was great. And the more research I did about it, the more I was just, overwhelmingly convinced that in life everything is about perception. In communication especially, it's not what you say that counts, it's what people perceive you to have said that counts. It's not what you do, it's what people perceive you to have done. So that whole area of perception is just absolutely fascinating. And look at politics these days. It's insane as to whether reality makes any difference whatsoever. It's all the perception of reality these days. And it couldn't be more highlighted by politics, be it Brexit or what's happening in the US at the moment. So, but I kind of figured that, while I was teaching at the University of Antwerp, it was it was incredible to see these kids while teaching. I call them kids. I mean, obviously they're over 18, but when you're talking to them about this and communication studies and how to converse properly and how you negotiate and you persuade and how that works, people's eyes are just, they pop open, and when they experience it themselves and they test these theories themselves and just see what a difference it makes, it's really revealing for them. And I think that really got me into this, a real passion into getting people informed about communication and watching as their lives just shift, as their lives change from doing something to doing something else, and them being more successful as a consequence. Um, and so for me, education became the thing. And so I went from being an IT consultant, which was, uh, I've got to confess, obviously very well paid, to being a teacher, which I think is no surprise when I say is not well paid at all. So, but I just felt like it was something that I had to do. I mean, I absolutely loved it, and the effect you have on people's lives is so substantial that it was something I had to continue to pursue. So that really was sort of my life's passion, and doing that. And obviously then I sort of, how else do you continue doing that? And then I found TED, and as an organization, which really blew me away. So yeah, really, really loved that field, and that's kind of where the passion stems from.
Wow, that's so interesting. I mean, so many interesting points you raise about the perception of communication and the way you present yourself and these things. I mean, how does one, apart from social media and the way that you control how you're perceived in a way, How do you kind of figure out how other people perceive you to be?
Well, and I think just developing a skill of empathy, develop it, and I call it a skill because it is something that you can develop. It's a behavior. It's a way of arriving at decisions. It's a mindset. So developing empathy is just phenomenal for you because it allows you to see your actions, the manner in which you communicate through the eyes of the person that you're communicating with, or those people that are perceiving the things that you're doing. And so, that's really, really important to have people understand that. And we live in a world where people are sort of increasingly, especially in the West, they're increasingly developing this mindset of, I am the center of my universe.
Mm.
And so really it's about, looking after number one, and making sure that I get what I need. And, I want to be rich, and I want to be successful, and I want to be famous. And this mindset, it's not so much, what can I do to solve somebody's problems? And as a consequence, I might become rich and famous and wealthy and all the rest of it. The goal these days is really, how am I going to become rich? How am I going to become famous? And so, that the mindset is a little bit skewed, I think. I feel like if more people had a skill of empathy, if more people realized that their actions had consequences on other people, then I think we wouldn't need this as much. That education wouldn't be as necessary. It used to be that religion would teach people that, from day one, they grew up thinking, oh, if I do something wrong, then I have a higher power to deal with. But, in an increasingly secular society, that's not there anymore. So suddenly there are fewer consequences to your actions. And so then, there's this, well, who am I living for? Well, if I'm living for me, then there are no consequences to the things that I do. So it's almost a little bit of educating people to understand other people's mindsets. And even if you do that for selfish reasons, that's fine. Do so for selfish reasons, but really understand other people. And of course, in understanding other people, people typically become better people anyway, kinder, gentler. They become good people, which of course has taken this to a completely new level. But in essence, I find that to be incredibly important.
Absolutely, absolutely, and especially a time like this, I hope has awakened people towards being more empathetic and to really observing and questioning why we've got to this where we are today as a society. Um, so, do you think that it chose you these paths in life, or you consciously went and chose it?
No, I think definitely this is something that it's a path that I followed because of the opportunities that arose. I never set out. I mean, I set out when I was a teenager, wanting to be my father. That's all there was to it. I wanted to be if you asked me when I was 12, I would have told you very specifically, I want to be vice president of a large corporation, vice president of finance, of a large automotive corporation. It had to be automotive. And I didn't actually mind whether it was Ford or whether it was, Toyota or General Motors, whatever it was. But obviously Ford at the time owned the premium automotive group. So that was Aston Martin, Jaguar, so actually Ford would have been lovely because then I would have been, had those brands and had those company cars. But no, so, that was my mindset. I wanted to be a finance person and very successful in a corporation and be really well respected. Like I saw my father was really well respected. But then, opportunities kind of presented themselves. And I like to think that I followed those. My first job was actually for Ford Motor Company. I went out to Brazil and I got a job there as a local employee, being paid in local currency. So that was really difficult. But I loved Brazil. I loved Ford, and so the two just matched really well. But then I had an opportunity to be transferred to Ford of Europe. And so I thought, great, I'm going to take that. And I took sort of a 3-month gap between starting work at Ford in the UK and leaving Ford Argentina, Brazil. Um, and while I had that 3-month gap, I actually came to Belgium, and somebody was talking to me about the internet and how cool it is that now you can put your CV on the internet. And by the way, the internet was a really new thing, right? So this was not, it was Netscape. It wasn't Internet Explorer or any of that stuff. It was, just, it was a really new thing. So I put my CV online, or I filled out a form so that my CV technically was online. And I got an interview for an IT consultancy company in Belgium. And I went to go and look. I figured I might as well go to the interview now that I've got an interview. And they gave me an offer for, really, really good place. And so I said, thank you very much to Ford of Europe, but no. And then I found this position in Belgium. And then being here and being exposed to these new opportunities, so my company merged with another. And while that happened, my boss said to me, hey, Dirk, you've always wanted to do an MBA. Now's the time to go and do it because the company is emerging. This is going to become a mess. So, and I got on really well with my boss. Ironically, when I came back, he was no longer there. So he predicted it right. It really was a mess. And so I got that opportunity to study, and then my eyes were open to this new idea of communication. And so, there a job opened up at the University of Antwerp, and I thought, well, I'm not really qualified to do this, but actually I really want to do this. So I jumped at that position. And so, all these opportunities opened up here and there, and the dean of a school passed away, and so there was a job opening, and so I went over there, and I'd helped them out quite a lot anyway, and so they already knew me and they thought about me for this role, and so I jumped in there. So it was a case of one opportunity leading to another, and each opportunity was something I really enjoyed, and so pursued. And by the way, if something wasn't fun, I also dropped it. So very recently things didn't work out the way I expected them to at a position that I was at. And I dropped out really quickly, and I was left a little bit insecure as to, what am I going to do now, and how am I going to fund these other businesses that I'm running? But another opportunity opened up, amazing, and now this is going really well as well. So yeah, I think, did it choose me? I don't know. The opportunities were certainly there, and I seized them when they were there.
Yeah, and I'm sure, moving from places like Brazil, which is so culturally rich, and then coming to different parts, I guess, you must have been exposed and observing communication in so many different shapes or forms of intercultural. So that's really interesting. So as you've evolved, and you've mentioned, what you thought you wanted to be a bit more like your father, and these goals of being like VP and stuff. Today, how would you define success for you?
I think success is all about making an impact. And I'd stand by that. Success is it's not about making money. It's not about levels of fame. It's about using whatever fame you have in order to make an impact. And it's about using any success that you have, any wealth that you may have generated to make an impact. And that's really something that I live my life by. And it's something my wife shares. So she has passions in scuba diving. So she started her own YouTube channel, which started very small, but she's been doing it as well as IT consultancy on the side. So she's just kind of doing that as a hobby. She teaches kids how to scuba dive. It's something that I absolutely love. The TED organization, all of this is volunteer work. So, we've never made a dime out of all the TED organization. That's really time-consuming work. But the impact that you make on people, I mean, it's really quite surreal. When you go on stage after a speaker leaves the stage and you look out, over 1,200 people in the audience, and you look as they're all wiping their tears away because the speaker really touched them and what they were saying, or or you watch them and they're just in complete shock and awe about something that they've just experienced on stage. Making that impact, or in my case, facilitating that impact is made by these incredible speakers who are so much more gifted than anything that I could have ever done. So facilitating that is really phenomenal. Absolutely. Success is about making an impact.
Definitely. We're so lucky to live in this day and age now where, you have talks like that which are free to watch, and not just limited to being at the conference itself, and, this whole new wave of a generation that's getting inspired in so many like incredible ways, and the ways that people are giving back is absolutely phenomenal. So what is it like, I have to ask you, what is it like running this show? Because like you've put this, you've really set the bar, like the bar high. I mean, you've got these venues like the Philharmonie, and all these incredible places for speakers to come. And I wrote this blog post recently where I sort of described my experience of kind of walking into the first moment of coming into Philharmonie, that morning of the conference, and having no sleep and all of that stuff. And it was like a military operation that was just happening on the ground, and it was so precise. And there was, I don't know how many people you had, but at least 20, 30 people running around doing things. And it was mind-blowing. And the fact that it is a voluntary thing. So tell us what it's like. How much time do you spend developing this conference? How's it grown, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, it's by the way, here's my TEDx Luxembourg City mug. I was just grabbing a coffee. Yeah, I mean, it's led by passion. I'm not an event manager. I don't organize events for a living, albeit now one could argue that I do. But I definitely didn't get into it for event organization. It really is a case of just see what works and what didn't work. I've got to confess, though, it's not like all of this was just my doing. The TED organization has this incredible network of TEDx organizers. And so, they're so willing. These are incredible people that are so willing to share their own experiences, and best practice. And, there's a hub up there of everything people have done to organize events. And so the information's all there. And fortunately, I can research quite well. So I just kind of went through that as a result of being an academic. So I've just kind of went through the information and thought, okay, if this is what a structure of an event looks like, then let's get the team together. So then I went out, in Luxembourg and tried to find people that I thought were equally enthusiastic. And so I'd say we have about 3 people that work on this almost full time, at least year round. It's not full time at all, but it's year round. So, we all have our full-time jobs that we do, but we're consciously aware of things. And so between the 3 of us, there's always something that we're doing for TEDx, TEDx Luxembourg City. So those are the 3. Then when it gets closer to the dates and we need to start thinking about sponsors and raising money, when we need to think about the location, the event, then we get a group of sort of an extra 5 people that help out. And on the day, it's about, like you said, it's a bit of a military operation, because there are about 50 of us in total. But fortunately, those are 50 starting from 13-year-old kids all the way up to, retirees that help out. So, but they all share a complete love of the platform. So how is it to organize the event? I mean, it's a huge amount of work, undoubtedly. So everything from finding speakers all the way through to finding sponsors, to finding attendees, to the day itself is insane. And then even the follow-up, just to make sure that things go well, because whereas most events stop on the day, with a TEDx event, of course, all of these talks need to be, properly edited, and sound needs to be adjusted, and sometimes changes need to be made. And so we need to maybe contact the speaker again and ask about certain things that they said that we didn't have visuals to, or that kind of thing. So, and then we need to upload those and they need to be approved. So it's a massive event. And it's an event of the Philharmonie has 1,200 people. So it's a huge undertaking. But I'd say that I'm one of those people that I typically bite off more than I can chew and then figure out how to chew later. It was just kind of a progression, one on top of the other, on top of the other, and things worked out really well in the end.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's insane. So like now what's the situation with COVID and like, you know, how, like, are you planning to do some of this completely online now, or like what do you sort of foresee for it?
So we had an event planned in June, June 2020. So of course that couldn't happen. All gatherings of all gatherings were forbidden, and then it was gatherings of 10, and now it's gatherings of 50. But you know, the Philharmonie is 1,200 people, if that's still possible, because you know, just talking to the venue, they're talking about just completely reorganizing the venue inside, so that now instead of 1,200 people, they might have half that capacity in order to accommodate social distancing inside the venue. So that's going to have very much changed. So yes, so suddenly we had this event planned. There was a lot going on in order for it to happen, and then COVID happened, this pandemic, and we were kind of stuck and had nowhere to go with it. So we decided we were going to try and produce some kind of online content in order to, you know, satisfy this demand that we had, you know, procured through social media. So, okay, but how do you do that? And how do people, you know, typically this is a 5 to 6 hour event. 5 to 6 hours online, that doesn't work. You know, screen fatigue is absolutely incredible. People, they lose attention after 3-4 minutes. You know, they'll look up, they'll look away, and then in order to get them back to the screen is a lot harder than when you're in an audience and you look up and you look away after maybe 7 minutes, and then to get you focused back on the stage actually is a lot easier. But when you're in your own home and you've got all this stuff going on around you and you lose focus, there's a bunch of other stuff that you could be doing in your own house. So screen fatigue is a real issue, and keeping people's attention is difficult. So we figured, do we go for this long form programming, you know, which is a typical TEDx event, or do we convert to short form programming? And then, you know, how long do we make something? Well, let's say 15 to 18 minutes, which is a typical TED Talk. So we thought about doing these interviews with past speakers. So we filmed a couple of those, went to talk to some sponsors to see if they would be interested in helping us out do that, because it's very, very time consuming, and we had to get some editors on board and that kind of thing. So one of our sponsors was super psyched about it, because of course they also have that problem. They have their marketing budget and suddenly they have no events. So they were also curious for new styles of events. So one of our sponsors, the ING Bank, was super stoked about doing it. So we did that together. And that worked out pretty well. But, you know, what is successful in online programming? We really weren't sure. So now we are thinking of doing TEDx Live. So we're taking the TED Talks that were done in the US for TED 2020, because all of that entire event was online as well. So we're going to take some of those talks and a couple of live speakers as well. And we're going to do that probably in August now. So we had these interviews. We also did some TED circles, just getting people that are real TED fanatics together and just getting them to talk about a TED Talk. That worked really well. And it's incredible. One thing that TED Circles really showed me also was how incredibly insightful relationships can be, conversations can be, when you no longer talk about small talk. You know, you get them to watch a TED Talk about something really deep and meaningful, and then you get people, strangers, complete strangers, to talk about it. And the connections made between those strangers are really deep very, very quickly because they're talking about something that's real, that has real impact in their lives. So that was phenomenal to see. So we did that through TED Circles. So interviews, TED Circles, and now TEDx Live. So we're going to do TEDx Luxembourg City Live sometime in October. And we're trying to figure out now, how can we get the audience to engage each other? And we're still sort of brainstorming about that now together with the team. Actually, we have a meeting tonight. So we'll see how that goes. But it's a challenging time, you know, for people like us. The whole idea is ideas worth spreading, but getting people together in a room and having them experience something together, suddenly that's no longer possible. So how do you engage these people virtually? And it's not that easy, but certainly I'm learning from the TEDx community, so which is phenomenal.
Super interesting. And I'm sure you get asked this a lot, but what do you look for in a speaker?
Well, so I'll be perfectly honest, we don't look for speakers. We look for ideas. So the team will get together and we'll basically say, okay, this is Luxembourg City, what's happening? You know, what are people interested in? What's the current affairs? What's happening here in Luxembourg City that makes us slightly different from everywhere else? And so, you know, at the time, for example, the TEDx Luxembourg City Women event that happened in December, just before the COVID outbreak, we thought Luxembourg City at the time had made all public transport free, you know, and that was mind-blowing to most countries. So they thought, well, you know, how are they going to go about doing that, and how does that work? And so this whole public transport thing, we thought, do we get a minister to come and talk about it? But then the talks become quite political, so we didn't want that. So we thought, okay, public transportation, you've got these electronic scooters that are all over the place. You know, that's another form of public transportation, which people are, while they can get on the tram for free, they're actually buying or they're renting these little scooters. So we thought, let's find somebody in this micromobility space. So we found one of the most senior people in that area, and they came to talk about micromobility. So we always just concentrate on the ideas. And then as a team, we agree on what ideas there are. And then we go and look for speakers for those ideas. Now, having said that, that is typically how we do it. But having said that, there are certain people that are absolutely fascinating. And so in certain instances, we will choose a person and ask them, do they have an idea for a TED Talk? And, you know, it's often been said, everybody has a TED Talk in them. And I've found that very much to be true. So there are certain people we do invite because of who they are. And certainly, and that's usually gone really well as well. Of course, then we need to help them develop their message and develop their talk, which is great. And we can certainly do that. I would certainly prefer somebody who was less engaging but has a better idea than somebody who's super engaging but has an old idea, you know, because I can train you to be engaging and present, but I can't give you a good idea, you know. So I can get you to present your idea really well and engage your audience over the 15 minutes that you're on stage. So that I'm quite happy with. And I think that's why the focus has always been on the ideas. And, you know, TED, it's ideas worth spreading. That's their logo. So that's what we focus on. So yes, we don't look for speakers, we look for ideas.
Super interesting. So what have been some of your favorite TED Talks?
Wow. Okay, listen, I'm going to be really honest with you. My favorite TED Talks are always the last ones that I watch. And they're especially the talks that have happened at TEDx Luxembourg City. It's very difficult to separate the experience of working together with the speaker and their talk than just going online and watching a talk. I mean, there are incredible talks online, of course, you know, and I think the most viewed TED Talk of all time, Sir Kenneth Robinson talking about how creativity is killed by education. I mean, I think that's probably one of those TED Talks that brings people into the platform. You know, Hans Rosling, what he's done for data, and he's done numerous TED Talks presenting data in a fascinating way. So all of Hans Rosling's talks are amazing. And unfortunately, you know, he passed away a couple of years ago, very unfortunately. But typically the really good TED Talks are the ones that I'm involved with almost from the very beginning, where people, I ask them, do you want to come and do a talk about this idea? And they'll, great, you do. And then we'll kind of organize the talk together. And, all I do is structure it in a way where it's suitable for a 15-minute talk. TED Talks are maximum 18 minutes. I can't even upload the talk to their platform if it's longer than 18 minutes. So we always shoot for about 15. And so, developing that talk and watching people as they bring this message, these complicated messages, and they simplify it into something so beautifully coherent, with these, with the way that they support their arguments as well. And of course, some people, the way they support their arguments, it's just something they feel, but then you need to say to them, for it to be a TED Talk, there needs to be a scientific basis for it to be up there. So then they quickly go and find out everything they know to be true anyway, but they'll go and research it and figure that out. And so that's really interesting. So yeah, I mean, go to TEDxLuxembourgCity.org, and there are 9 talks there from in December. Each one's more fascinating than the next. We had a professional soccer player who came to talk to us about what it's like to be a female professional soccer player, and not even soccer player, but a goalkeeper. She plays for one of the best teams in Germany. We had a lady come and talk to us about how she wants to go and live on Mars. So, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. I did a follow-up interview with her. She'd lived in the Antarctic for, I think, a few weeks. Then she went to the Oman Desert to go and live there for a little while. Of course, we had the former Princess Tessie, who you know very, very well. And she has this phenomenal way of connecting with people. And so, we kind of figured out, what is that and how do you do that? And so she came up with, the three pillars of magic and connectedness, which was phenomenal. So all of those talks are really worth going to see. So which are my favorite talks? It's always the ones that I've been involved with and at the very last event.
2 questions about this. So have you ever encountered potential speakers that you really feel like they represent the highest caliber of an idea or a concept that you're looking to explore in TEDx, and have they been reluctant, and then would you try and convince them, or is it just sort of, okay, fine, I'll just find somebody else who could represent that theme?
So have I tried to convince somebody? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Has it always worked? Majority of the time it doesn't. I think people are really daunted by the platform. They hear about a TED Talk, and I tend to find 2 types of people and very little in between. It's the people that they hear of TED Talks and they think there's no way I could do a TED Talk, just none. And you say to them, but your ideas are amazing. You really, people need to hear it. So come onto a stage and talk about it. No. I'm not in any way qualified to give a TED Talk. I couldn't do that. I could never stand on stage. So at some point, I can try and convince them and show them that it's not as hard as they think. And so occasionally somebody will change their mind. But then there's the other group of people. You say to them, hey, would you want to come and do a TED Talk about this idea? And for them, it's already a bucket list item. They know that they've accomplished a whole bunch of things in their life, and you ask them to do a TED Talk, they say, no way, oh, I've always wanted to do a TED Talk. And then it's about taking that enthusiasm and saying to them, okay, you've got 15 minutes on stage, so let's take your ideas, your multiple ideas, and just narrow it down to one. And then, your lifetime's worth of experience, and taking all these analogies and these stories that you have that support your ideas, and just focusing them down to a couple. And I think we kind of went through that experience as well, where you'd written out quite a lot, and then, that's going to be probably slightly too long. So let's just kind of take this paragraph out. And you look at the speaker when you're telling them, we're not going to use that paragraph at all, and they're just heartbroken. But this means so much to me. I know it does, but people can't, it's going to be too long and people aren't going to engage in this. And while it makes sense to a speaker, it might not make sense to an audience that doesn't have the kind of knowledge that you do in your field. So it's about taking all of this extensive knowledge and life's work and lifetime's worth of experiences and condensing it down to something that's easily digestible by somebody who has no experience in your field. And that's not easy. So it's difficult to persuade somebody to do it. It has been done. I have persuaded somebody to do it, but yeah, typically I prefer to find those people that want to do it because it usually works better that way.
Of course. And I think there's also another element in this, which, some people may not know, having maybe not experienced the platform and the behind the scenes element, that TED speakers don't get paid, and so there is, and money's, when you talk about taking someone's time and then maybe traveling somewhere and investing their own money in coming and supporting the conference, and then sometimes those people are also of a certain caliber where they get booked out regularly on the public speaking circuit, and they just don't want to give that for free, but ultimately, as you say, it is a non-profit organization. And ultimately, it's about impact, and there are plenty of people that would love to, and would give their left arm to do it, a talk of that manner. Something else I just want to ask you about that is, like, with a successful show, how do you want your audiences to engage with the ideas that are presented to them?
That's a really difficult one. How do they engage with the talks? What I typically find is the audience will connect with different speakers depending on their own life experiences. Typically, I will go out into the audience during the breaks and ask them, who's your favorite speaker so far? And it's without fail, I will always get different names.
Yeah.
There's usually not one speaker that won't be mentioned by somebody. And even somebody who may have gone on stage and their performance may not have been as good as their rehearsal, which is heartbreaking to me because so in fact, I've got to tell you, I had an experience with a speaker who did the rehearsal the night before in front of the TED team, and every single one of us was in tears.
Wow.
It was just such a beautiful talk. And on the day of the event, it just didn't work. And it's not that she didn't say the same things. I mean, the stories were slightly, ever so slightly different, but she just didn't engage. She didn't look at the audience. She was looking down while talking, and she knew to do better than that, but that's what happened. And so the audience, I figure, didn't really engage, and they mostly didn't. And it's heartbreaking when that happens. But even when I think things didn't go very well on the day of the event, and then I go out into the audience and say, hey, who was your favorite speaker? Inevitably, somebody will say that person. Because, a TED audience member, a TED attendee is incredible because they're all typically better educated. They're all typically very open-minded people. They're typically all looking for self-improvement. Those are the people that like TED Talks. They want to hear new ideas. They want to learn. They want to be better. And so getting all of these people in a room is amazing because these are really great people anyway. So then you go and talk to them and they'll say, yeah, I wanted to do this and I was reading something about that and that was really fascinating. So my favorite speaker was, this person. Whereas for somebody sitting right next to them, I say, oh no, that didn't connect with me at all, but that one really connected. So yeah, I think, how do you get an audience to engage with a speaker? You've got to work with their delivery, the delivery of the speaker. You've got to make sure they're engaging as people. I mean, things like looking at the audience and all the check boxes of how to engage an audience. There's very simple way of doing that. But inevitably the audience will connect anyway because of their own personal experiences. And so that's something that you can't predict. But every event that we've ever done, I've always looked out at the audience and there have been people that have connected in a way that is just phenomenal. And I think that's why I continue to do and to host these TED events and organize these TED events, despite there being no money in it, despite it taking so much time. Um, it's just phenomenal to see that, to see what happen. I think is just incredible.
100%, 100%. Um, Now, I'm sure you get asked this a lot, and this is also probably something we could probably do a whole episode on, but just, in a few in a few minutes, you talk about the experience of, that lady who you were blown away by in the rehearsal, and then, when on stage, just the fear or the nerves just completely took a hold. And like we both know that public speaking is just one of those things that people really fear in life. And you are somebody that has a phenomenal ability to coach people through that. So what advice would you give to someone who does have a fear of public speaking?
So there is definitely no silver bullet, right, or golden bullet. It's all about practice. And whenever I talk to speakers after the event, I'd say 90% of them will always say, I should have put a little bit more time. I should have given myself a little bit more time to practice. I should have. So, the whole in hindsight, practice would have made this so much better. So there's no one thing you can do to make you a better speaker other than practice. And of course, practice takes time. It's an invest time and effort. And however, there are certainly things that you can do to make that practice in a more structured manner. There's definitely a better way of speaking. There's a better way of having a more effective voice. There's having a more engaging presence on stage. So what you do with your body language is super important. Even where you stand on stage is really important. Having a little bit of a dynamic on stage where you're moving between your points, those kinds of things. How you engage your audience, it's not just the eye contact, albeit it definitely is, but are you going to use humor on stage? And of course, some people say, well, humor is never appropriate for what I want to talk about. I don't know. I've coached probably over 100 TED speakers for TEDx Luxembourg City and other events that I've organized. And I'm not sure I've ever come across an idea where humor wouldn't have worked. Now, some have chosen not to use it, but if you look at the really, really popular TED Talks, predominantly they're funny. I've mentioned Sir Ken Robinson about his talk, How Creativity is Killed by Education. Really, that's kind of a stand-up routine. The guy gets on stage and it's one personal anecdote after the next, and they're all unbelievably funny, which you wouldn't expect from a professor, right? An academic isn't usually that funny. But no, it works really, really well. So then people immediately say, yeah, but I'm not funny, so I can't possibly consider doing jokes. And of course, there are ways of incorporating humor where it's easier. So there's sort of best practice to incorporating humor. And so we can certainly talk about that. And so I tend to try and guide the speakers into using a bit of humor if they can. 6 hours is a long time for an audience member to be sat down listening to people talking. If you think about a TED conference, it usually is, I mean, it's kind of a festival of speeches. You go to a festival, you're expecting 6 hours of music. This is, a festival of talks. So just sitting there listening for that long is really difficult. So if people can laugh, they're more engaged. So I think with your voice, with your body language, engaging people with a proper structure, which is hugely important, with one key message as opposed to multiple, so that you keep it really simple. All of these things make a really good TED Talk. And then how do you get over your nerves? It's practice, but practice these things. You're practicing your body language, you're practicing your voice, you're practicing how to engage the audience, you're practicing in a very structured way. And I think that's what's really important.
100%. Practice does hopefully make perfect. And you know, there was that crazy statistic about which I certainly discovered when looking into how to actually deliver this talk, of what was it, 1 hour practice per minute, which was like, you know, you just think that's crazy because like some of the talks that you see online with TED, like they seem supernatural, there's a flow, and you just couldn't imagine that, you know, that's gone on for 1 hour. But there's just so many things you talk about, like, you know, with the body language, the tone, and I think crucially, particularly on that stage or on any stage where there's pressure, if you've practiced that much and you forget, then it's very easy for your mind to just go back to, you know, just say it in a different way and bounce back without the audience knowing that, you know, you slipped up there or it wasn't how it was meant to be. Something you talk about earlier with what you advise, or you help people with a little bit, which is a bit different to public speaking, but negotiation. Give me some of your top tips.
Negotiation skills. Yeah, I've done so in the world of academia. I've studied negotiation skills a little bit, and well, a little bit, a fair amount. And you tend to find that negotiation and persuasion and power, all of these things are basically just a bunch of theories which play out in a particular way, and therefore it becomes incredibly predictable. So if you're well informed going into a negotiation and you know how to react when your counterpart does something, then you're going to come out with a better result. I mean, it really is that simple. So you don't need to be this massively creative person that understands how to do things on the spot. You just need to go in with a very clear mindset. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. Um, the very basics of negotiation, you've got to have, you know, your blue sky, assuming that you're talking about negotiating the price of something, which typically is very common. You know, you've got to have your blue sky price. So what is it? What's your opening bid going to be? You've got to have your bottom line, which is if I don't hit that, if I don't get more than my bottom line, I'm going to walk away.
Yeah.
Right now, and then you've got to have your alternatives, and these all need to be pre-prepared before you even walk into the room.
Yeah.
Now, if you understand those three, you're already going to be much better than somebody that hasn't walked in, that's walked in without that preparation. Because things like having a bottom line, there are people who are trained in negotiation are trained to get you to reconsider your bottom line during the negotiation. You know, they'll adjust the leverage, even if it's just the time spent in the negotiation, they'll adjust the leverage. And by leverage, I mean, who stands to lose most if no deal is done? You know, so somebody, let's put this into practice. If you want to go and buy a new car, right, which obviously it's all going to come back to automotive, right? If you want to go and buy a new car, then you're going to say to yourself, yeah, well, you know, if I'm willing to pay 20,000 for that car, list price is 25, but if I don't get it for 20,000, then I'm going to walk away and I'm going to go somewhere else. Now, you're going to walk into that room knowing if it's 20,001 pound or 20,001 euro, there's no way I'm paying it. And you may think, oh, just that €1, what the hell? But no, absolutely. That's not to say you can't come back at a later date and start the negotiation again. But you don't hit that bottom line, you've got to leave. Now, typically, what are the things that people hear? They go in to negotiate for a car, and then they start hearing about, well, there are a limited number of those cars available. You know, there's the specific color that you wanted, they're not making that anymore. And so actually, you know, if you want that car, this is the car we have in stock, and this one you get really quickly, but actually somebody else has already put an option on that car, and so it might not be available anymore. Everything they're telling you, which again, it's a checklist of things, you know, the law of scarcity, all of these things that they're basically projecting on you is making you reconsider your bottom line. So, you know, what's the most effective thing that I can tell anybody going into a negotiation? Make sure you have your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, your BATNA, make sure you have your bottom line, and make sure you know your blue sky. Those three things, you're already going to be a lot better. But of course, there's so much more, right? And really anybody can negotiate, and everything is negotiable. You've just got to prepare yourself. Now, while everything is negotiable, it doesn't mean you want to negotiate for everything, because sometimes the biggest thing you stand to lose is your time. You know, I'm sure I can go to a supermarket and negotiate for the price of some blueberries, but I don't want to, because I'm gonna lose time, right? So however, try it. You know, I've taken a bunch of my students to the supermarket and I've gotten them to negotiate for a banana. And they all say it's not possible, but eventually there are even people that have walked out with a free banana, because the manager of the store is like, why are we negotiating for banana? Just take it, leave. You know, but that's the point. Everything's negotiable.
Wow.
So yeah, bottom line, blue sky, BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Get
Wow.
ready with those three things, you're fine.
That is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Last couple of questions from me. Now that you've gone back to automotive, I do have to ask you, did you see Ford versus Ferrari? And what did you think of it?
Okay, now that movie actually meant quite a lot to me, because I took my father, and my father obviously was retired, and but that was his era. You know, he was there. He went to Michigan a number of times, and all of this that was going on was happening while he was at the company. So, you know, it was really pertinent. And when in that film, when they were talking about, you know, the abacus counters or the counters, right? He was finance at that time, and so certain things were just, why are you going to spend that kind of money developing this car when actually the return's not going to be great? Why on earth would you do it? So I went to see it with my dad, and halfway through, my dad started crying. And it was just, so that was one of the most meaningful movies that I've seen. It was beautiful. And so I've watched it with my kids. They weren't super interested. I've got two daughters that really aren't that interested in cars, unfortunately. But not through a lack of trying. I mean, I bought them a Scale Electric set when they were younger. I've kind of forced toy cars on them, but they just weren't having any of it.
Have you
Yeah,
taken?
amazing movie. Did you like it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I saw it in the States in a drive-through cinema, as American as it could get. You know, super retro. I've been to the Ford, Henry Ford thing in Detroit actually, which was absolutely just mind-blowing, just incredible to see the progression, the eras, the evolvement of cars. You know, sat in one of the first Model Ts, was it?
Yeah.
And that was insane. So yeah, I loved it, and I want to drive a Ford GT one day, get my hands behind the wheel. Talking about your kids, what has been, now I asked this question to a few people who've been on the show who are parents, and so far they've all been mothers. So it's great to hear from a father. What have been some of your secrets to good parenting?
um, it's funny actually. Before I answer that question, I've got to tell you, my daughter obviously is interested in TED Talks as well. Again, not that she wants to be, but I've kind of forced them on her. But at the end of the day, if you listen to TED Talks, it's fascinating. And there's a really good TED Talk that was done, I think, in Arizona. And I'm not sure precisely what TED Talk it was. I think it was University of Arizona. And it was a divorce lawyer that spoke about the importance of fathers, and why fathers should be equally regarded in a custodial battle and this kind of thing. But her TED Talk was all about the importance of fathers, and I sat and watched it together with my daughter. Just, it kind of spontaneously came on. I didn't think she'd be that interested in it, but while we were both watching it, it was just this emotional time between the two of us, because it made both of us realize how we connect with each other in quite a different level. You know, they gave some examples there about, yes, the father probably doesn't know the name of the geography teacher. The father probably doesn't understand or doesn't know the name of her best friend, but the father will understand what they're scared of. The father will, so there are a lot of dynamics that a father has with, in my case, two daughters. which I think are really important. And so that was just a lovely moment. And it really kind of made us realize the connection that we had with each other. Secret to parenting, I think being there, of course, but just being super involved. You know, my father was working a lot. And so he wasn't, you know, for me, it was really stay-at-home mother, working father, very, very traditional conservative background. And I think as a father, there's a lot that I can contribute to my kids. And so being there to answer the questions and being involved, I think that's hugely, hugely important. Involving them in activities is, so actually one of my oldest daughter organized her own TEDx event. So while she organized it, obviously, you know, I kind of helped her. So building this huge event at her school was an incredible experience for the two of us to go together. But if there's one thing that I'd like to share with every parent, which somebody once told me, and I thought that's ridiculous, but then I experienced it myself, here's the secret to parenting. When the kids all have to go and do something like music lessons, or when the kids go somewhere with their friends, be the first person to volunteer to take them. Why? Because when you go and pick up all of your kids' friends and they're sitting in the back of the car, they completely forget you're there. And so in forgetting that you're there, they talk to each other like they're at school. I've learned more about my daughters' lives when I brought them somewhere to theater school or to singing school, with the kids talking to each other in the back and the friends that they talk to, and, you know, and hey, how about that boy that you were talking to? I never knew she was talking to boys. And they're talking as if you're invisible. It's absolutely incredible. So a secret to parenting, go ahead and volunteer to take them and their friends to places as long distance a car journey as you can, and then just shut up while you're in the car and listen, because you will find out more about your kids than anything else. It's brilliant.
That's hilarious. Very cool. And last two questions. I'm going to put you on the spot now, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But if you did do a TED talk, what would the title be, or what would the idea be? Not even the title.
If I did a TED talk, well, I mean, obviously I've thought about it quite a lot. I think for me, the importance of communicating well is huge. And in order to develop that, people need to realize how important different aspects of communication are. So if I did a TED talk at some point, and maybe one day I hope to, I'd really focus on how important body language, your voice, and the way that you play with your voice, and how important it is to engage people. I would talk about that, and in that 15 minutes, I would predominantly focus on getting people to experience that themselves, so that when they left the talk, they voluntarily will go and research it more. I need people to understand how important it is, so that they are willing to take action on it. And I think in 15 minutes, I can convince people that it's hugely important. And in doing so, I think I'll have made an impact. So the title, I'm not sure what it would be, but it would really be something to do with your voice, your body language, and how to engage an audience.
Awesome. Okay, and the last question, which I do ask everyone on the show, is, and it's a deep dive question, but in a couple of minutes, what do you believe is the purpose of our existence here on planet Earth, and do you believe there's something else?
Well, I mentioned already that that I was brought up religious. I was brought up a Catholic, and while I don't go to church very much anymore, which hopefully my dad doesn't see this. But I mean, I do still have a belief in a higher being, and I would call that higher being God. But I think we have a purpose in life, and that is to create an impact on others. I think it's really important that we do what we can that we treat people the way that we would want to be treated, as cliche as that is, and make other people's lives for the better. And I think the great advantage to doing that is this concept of reciprocity. If you spend your life trying to do things for other people, ultimately that all comes back in some form of payment to you, because people will feel a sense of obligation to do something back for you. So don't expect it. Just go out and do nice things for as many people as you can, and you'll find that your life is better anyway. So even if you do it for selfish reasons, go ahead, but help other people. I've encouraged my students at university to do internships at not-for-profit organizations and to support charities. And I tell them all, do it because it looks really good on your CV. And so they'll go to organizations like Serve the City, which I work with a fair amount, UNICEF, and do fundraising for them. They'll go and organize these events and go and work with refugees, painting buildings. They'll do it because they want it for their CV, but actually once they've done it, they realize what a rewarding experience that is, and they continue to do it. So I think, you know, if I want to be remembered for anything, it really is a case of, you know, go ahead and make an impact on people. Be super nice to people. It'll all come back to you anyway. So, yeah.
Well, Dirk, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts about your life and opening up to us. Hope we get to see each other soon, and stay safe. That was a really empowering conversation. Hearing Dirk's perspectives on empathetic leadership, communication and negotiation were invaluable. It's unsurprising he's been so successful in those areas because he's genuinely authentic, and his nomadic upbringing from Belgium to Brazil has clearly been one of the greatest drivers in exposing him to a variety of cultures and people. I also think it's so true when he said that everyone has a TED Talk in them, and I hope this episode has given you more of an insight into what it takes to become a TED speaker, but also what the components of successful communication are, because it's one of the fundamental keys in unlocking and empowering your mission. And at the end of the day, as Dirk says, everything is a perception, and that forms our reality. So you have to be really conscious of how you communicate with the world around you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you're leaving with some great inspiration that can help you with whatever you want to achieve in your life. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you can be notified when a new episode is posted. It would also mean the world to us if you could rate and review the show and share it with your friends so we can reach as many people as possible. If you want to reach out to me as well, you can get in touch directly at dj.n1nja on Instagram and Twitter. That's dj.n1nja, and also at Mission Makers on social media. Thanks so much again for listening. Until next time, Mission Makers, stay safe and have an amazing week.
Yeah.
Well, Dirk, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts about your life and opening up to us. Hope we get to see each other soon, and stay safe.